In the 1990s, a group of doctors got together and wanted to test out a brand new drug to treat a condition called angina, which is when there is restricted blood flow to the heart. They brought in their test patients, they administered the drug, and the trial began. But all the male patients started noticing a new symptom turning up. The drug they were testing was called Viagra. And ta-da! A happy accident. This is what we call serendipity. It's a chance occurrence. It's a string of events that leads to an unexpected outcome. Now, I'm a theater artist, and it is my job to be creative. And it's a full-time gig using your imagination. I'm constantly having to create and look at new innovative ways of doing things. And when you're doing that all the time, of trying to generate new content, it can feel as though you are reaching into this deep well of ideas, and eventually that well can run dry. And when that happens, that is a nightmare. Because your value as an artist comes from your ability to be creative and innovative. So when that's gone, we often refer to that as writer's block, a lack of creativity or inspiration. I was looking at my own practice, and I started to notice my well was running dry. I began to become frustrated by this and feeling that stagnant creative energy, and I spoke to some artists that I admired, and I asked them what was happening in their process when they really felt like their creativity was flowing. And time and again, in their own words, they said there was always a moment in their process when something unexpected happened, when the thing they didn't anticipate occurred. And from there, it allowed the creativity to really flow and that excitement to bubble under what they were doing. So I began to wonder, could there be value in welcoming accidents into our process? Could the act of the thing not going the way you wanted it to go turn into being something that could create a better outcome? And if serendipity is what was happening, I wanted to find out how to make it happen for myself. So I became a serendipity detective. I started searching everything that I could and researching all about the topic. I connected with the Serena Project at University of Dundee and studied the formula around serendipity. I began collecting stories and looking at my own stories and trying to find patterns to see what would emerge. And sure enough, things did. I began to uncover a series of conditions that would allow for these happy accidents to happen. I started by changing the system. We are such creatures of habit. We do things again and again, and we fall into these ruts because that becomes a safety net for us. But if we want happy accidents to occur, we need to create space for risk. And so in my rehearsal processes, instead of doing the same thing again, I would take a scene with two people and try it as shadow puppetry, or try it again as a song, or do it just through movement. I would literally take us all the way out in one direction just to come back in a totally new way. And from there, surprises emerged. I started using my background as an improviser, where the first rule that they teach you is yes and. And the whole concept behind this is that you take an idea and you agree with it and then you build upon it. You look for the potential in the idea before you knock it down. I was making a new work with a collaborator, Danny Bryant, a playwright, and we knew we were making a show that was for young people, exploring how they navigate finding their identity in a digital age. And we were hitting some roadblocks as to figuring out how we wanted to present that idea. And then our conversation went something like this. What if we did the play as a fairy tale, a modern fairy tale? Yes, and what if our protagonists were princesses, but like badass princesses? Yes, and what if they have to defeat a dragon? Yes, and what if the dragon actually represents the internet? Yes, and what if the dragon is a massive puppet? And it has huge wings that we can project upon. And we can put all these internet trolls on them, speaking back to those princesses. Yes, and what if to defeat the dragon, the princesses have to actually unplug it because it's put into a power socket, sucking all this energy as it tries to consume them? Yes, and our ideas began to flow. And soon, before we knew it, we had a fully fledged production with a theater full of young people screaming and cheering on these badass princesses as they raced across the theater to defeat this evil dragon. It was loud, it was punk, it was cacophonous, it was full of surprises and very spectacle. But it's not always the big, loud moments when we see surprises and happy accidents occur. Sometimes it happens in the quiet moments. So I'd like to ask you to get quiet with me for a moment. I'd like you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and exhale. And with your eyes closed, I'd like you just to listen. Take a deep breath in, exhale, and open your eyes. It is amazing how alive a space becomes when we allow ourselves to be present in it. I was commissioned by the National Theatre of Scotland to create a new show, and it was going to be about the Northwestern Settlement House, which is a social service organization that provides support to people in need. Everyone from immigrants to people living below the poverty line. They provide an array of resources, and they have genuinely changed people's lives. So the act of creating a show about them is no small task. So we were on a short time frame, and we knew we had to find the hook for this story. And so we were frantically racing around the settlement house, interviewing people who worked there, spending time in the food pantry, spending time at their after-school services, until we eventually just sat down in one of the rooms. In that room, when we took a breath, we noticed a glass display case. And in that display case was an old violin. It piqued our interest. And so when we asked about it, we were told a couple years ago, that violin was brought to the settlement house by a Polish man in his 80s. He said that he was returning it to Harriet Vidum, who was the woman who ran the settlement house years before, but she's long since passed away. He said that she gave him that violin and made him promise that he would bring it back when he was finished with it. 75 years later, he did. Wow. There is our story, right there under our noses, in that space with us. What does it mean to keep a promise for so many years? And what does it mean to know if or when you're genuinely finished with something? We were so blown away by that story. And by being mindful and present and open, we were able to see the happy accidents that were right there in the space with us. But you can't always see the potential in something just by looking at it. For example, just by looking at me, you probably might not know that I am a unicorn. Literally. I make a lot of political theater. I do a lot of theater for social change, taking issues and problems and using theater as a tool for discourse. And I wanted to take a break for a moment and just make something that wasn't going to be political, was just going to be fun, an opportunity to laugh and have a good time, a one-off. And so I teamed up with one of my collaborators, the fantastic Ruxy Cantier, and we created something called Unicorn Dance Party. The concept behind this piece is that we dress up as unicorns in fully clad silver spandex unitards, and we disrupt public spaces by turning on some amazing jams, and we start dancing using prancercise, which is like jazzercise, but way better. I should note that whenever you do something in the street, it is inherently risky because no one has purchased a ticket. Whoever is there on the day is on their way to something, and how they choose to engage with you is completely up to them. So we put on our unicorn outfits, we went out into the street, and we put on our music, and we began prancercising. And we were there, letting the music go, things were bumping, and what happened next was magical. People in business suits with grumpy looks on their faces stopped, and they smiled. Little kids came out and started busting moves. We had grannies and grandpas forming conga lines, and we had a whole group of wheelchair users that were spinning around in circles, and it was amazing. It was incredible, the energy to watch all these strangers come together and laugh and smile and feel joy, to get rid of the weight of the world off their shoulders for just a moment, to come and dance with some unicorns. It was delightful. And it was through that connecting with people that we saw that by trying to make something that wasn't at all political, we inherently made something that was a massive form of activism. We were like this joy rebellion taking over the streets. And through connecting with those people, what we tried to make turned into what they needed it to be. They allowed us to see what the potential of the idea could really turn into. But to truly make serendipity happen, it requires taking the leap. It's not enough to have the insight and the accident occur. It requires taking action, because there's great courage in being okay with not knowing what's possible, but pursuing it anyway. When I'm making a new piece of work, I never really know what it is. I'll have an idea in my head of where I'd like it to go, but it's not until the happy accidents come along the way that I begin to see how I could be more innovative, how I could take those creative ideas further. So if we want to make serendipity happen, we have to change the system. We have to say yes and be mindful, connect with people, and of course, take the leap. Because serendipity is all around us if we help it to appear. And if we all start making some more happy accidents, just think of the amount of creativity we can collectively unleash on the world. Thank you. Thank you.